good evening, I guess is what I should say. It is 1:13 a.m., a little later than I'm used to for recording. So if I'm even quieter than usual, I apologize because I know that I'm already quiet most of the time. Today I don't know, I really want to talk about a couple of things before going to bed. Because today was a very disturbing day, and like most people, I am ashamed to say that social media did get to me with everything going on, all the negative posts, and you feel this obligation to be aware of more than what's going on in your immediate field of vision. So we have Black Lives Matter at the forefront of social media in North America, and I'm sure all over the world, but then there are things happening elsewhere. There's Palestine, there's Hong Kong, there's the whole issue of China, there's stuff happening in Korea in my case. It gets to you, and I wish that I could say that it doesn't, and that I'm equally aware of everything that's going on in the world, but unfortunately I am not. And this will be the first side note. I see a lot of people criticizing people for caring only about one issue over others. I think that's clearly flawed. I don't see how you can expect somebody to keep up with everything at the same time, and if that gives you grounds to criticize them or call them hypocrites, I see a lapse of judgment there. How can you expect that? So the first thing on my little list here is Kenny Smith. He's one of the, I guess you'd call him anchors or commentators on TNT, and today he walked out on the job, saying that he is in solidarity with the players of the NBA who have decided not to play today, and I think they are questioning whether or not these playoffs will even continue. And the reason I want to speak about Kenny Smith is that, this entire day has been toxic as hell online, just because I see all the comments, people saying that they should just shut up and dribble, that athletes the tone is that we feed you athletes by buying merchandise and tickets and so on and so forth. It does sound entitled. I'm just gonna be blunt. It's 1 a.m. Fuck it. It sounds very entitled, very stupid, to be quite honest. There's a lot of things that I find problematic with that line of thinking. That's all I'm gonna say about that. But the comments with Kenny Smith are very interesting to me, and I think there's a problem in both sides, and it's stupid that it becomes a matter of sides, but for the sake of finishing this video and brevity, two sides. One side was kind of glorifying him, saying, yeah, I love this show because of you. You are amazing, great, I love it, thank you so much. And the other side is obviously being the other side. But there's one tone in that other side that I've seen before, I've heard before, and I've thought myself when looking at other figures. And that is the issue of virtue signaling. And I don't know where this term came from, but that's beside the point. The thing is, virtue signaling, I think, it is a thing that people put on a show in order to garner public attention and positive attention, and they take advantage of these situations, and they think that by speaking out, they can get some sort of positive return on it. And people were accusing Kenny Smith of doing that, of virtue signaling, of trying to capitalize off of this quote-unquote popular thing to do, which is walking out today. And I think it's very clear that it's not, or actually, I shouldn't jump to that conclusion. Perhaps it is. In my opinion, and what I saw, I don't think it was. But the reason I feel like I feel like this is a topic worth diving into because of the other side, or that first side that I mentioned. The former side glorifies these people, and that is effectively what is creating this need, or the appeal of virtue signaling, is that we somehow think, in many ways, like it's how we reward sensationalism. We give them their attention, we give them our attention, and thereby making them rich. We adore celebrities, we adore, like, I still don't understand how the Kardashians are a thing, but they are a thing. Prank YouTubers were a thing. I'm thinking of the Paul brothers on YouTube. That's a thing. We reward this type of behavior, and in doing so, we create an appeal and a market for it, and obviously people want to capitalize and jump on that. So in glorifying figures or celebrities for speaking out or doing the bare minimum of good, we are in effect creating that same type of echo chamber atmosphere, and creating appeal and great value for people to lie and pretend that they care, which creates more room for criticism and people pointing out our hypocrisy, which is never a good stance to try to argue back, because oftentimes, yes, you are being a hypocrite. You are praising somebody who does not deserve praise because they probably turn around and continue to be racist behind your back. So we have to really stop that, is what I'm seeing. The third point I wrote down is that it's stupid that we have to worry about giving people something to be distracted by and criticize. So by that I mean, it's kind of the same thing where there's this rhetoric of the snowflake culture and cancel culture where we're all treading on eggshells, and which is true. We have to be so much more careful about what we put on the internet, what we say to people around us, what we put out there digitally, even through text messages or anything like that. We have to be careful of whatever we put on the internet even 10 years back. But much like that, when we are trying to fight for something good, when we are trying to be anti-racist, we have to be extra careful to not give people room to criticize. For the sole reason, and the main reason, maybe not the sole reason, is that it gets people distracted. So when we see cases like Rayshard Brooks, and we see cases like Jacob Blake, and we see the videos, and we do see that they resist arrest. In the case of Rayshard Brooks, he even steals a taser gun, and with Jacob Blake, he's reaching into his car, and people are saying that that is a clear case or cause for concern. And then now I'm hearing that he had a knife in his hand, and I don't know if that's true or not. But regardless of whether it's true or not, if it is true though, we have to be slow to sweep that under the rug. If we just shouldn't sweep that under the rug. There are things that you just present as fact, but I do see too much of people trying to erase that. And I understand why, because at the end of the day, those things are not important. And I agree, those things are not important, because what we are trying to discuss is the fact that had they been white, they most likely would not have been killed. And I've seen a lot of videos in the last couple of days of this very thing, of white males resisting arrest, stealing officers' tasers, trying to harm the officer, yet they are still detained and arrested without being shot or killed. And of course that could be propaganda, that could just be because of what I normally consume and marketed towards me to create a bias, but my gut feeling is that they aren't. Really, that's all I have to say. I have reason to believe, I think, that they are true. But yeah, again, just not giving people room to criticize you for lying or being a hypocrite because you choose to not address those things. It's not like we don't want to be distracted in the conversation by those things, but we also can't just ignore it. And we can't, especially there are posts that are saying like, oh, we'll get to this, but there are posts that try so hard to paint them in a positive light, and it's very similar to how racists try so hard to paint them in negative light. It's in the word choices that you use, it's in the way that you phrase it. It's like how Asian parents try to hype up their kids, like, oh, they had, such a hard semester, but they still got straight A's. Like, the way you phrase something, the way you approach it, it shows your intention. And I think the best way to present these stories is to present it in a very matter-of-fact, neutral manner. But obviously, emotions are running high, and I don't blame people. But that's something to be mindful of. For the people, next point, that are criticizing, I don't think you would be listening to me. So maybe for the people that need something to say, I never felt compelled by other people's words. I always thought it was very corny to repost other people's quotes and whatnot. But today on Instagram, I found this little gem. I forgot who shared it, but whoever did, thank you. The quote goes like this: I think you were so busy looking for a riot that you missed the gathering of the grieving. I think you were so busy looking for looters that you missed the lament and heartbreak of a community. I think you were so busy looking for trouble that you missed the tragedy of systemic racialized trauma on the bodies of black and brown people. Tonight, tomorrow, and even the next day, I beg of you, look again, look again. The basic thing is just, you are nitpicking, you are criticizing, and in many cases, you're right. And sure, I guess you can argue that it's justified and warranted for the greater whatever. But if you really just take a step back and see at what damage this has caused at the family level in black communities, you will see that you are missing something that is more important. The thing is, with racism, it's such a finicky, intangible thing. Oftentimes, the fact that it's intangible makes it sound like a very incoherent or logically not sound argument or conversation to have. And I get that as somebody who prides or prioritizes logic, but also as an Asian Canadian individual, that there have been cases where I've felt it and I have no grounds to feel it, but for some reason I do. And I can't imagine how the black community must feel that, because I'm sure that they feel that at a much higher rate than I do. During COVID-19, just by the fact that I am Asian, it felt much more pronounced, where it's very subtle things. But that's a topic for the future. Fifth and last point, I wanted to make a video on this entirely separately, and I probably still will, because this will just eat up way too much time. But this is an article called A Commentary on Moral Disengagement, the Rhetoric and the Reality. And the author is Albert Bandura, I think is how I pronounce it, and it's from the American Journal of Psychology, volume 131, number 2, summer 2018, pages 246 to 251. And it's a back and forth between Bandura, who wrote this book years ago, I believe, and a pair named Dahl and Walzer, who reviewed the book. The book is called Moral Disengagement. All of that, though, is not important for today. Here are just some of the points that I highlighted, and I think that are very relevant to today. It's speaking about how the conversation around morality focuses heavily on moral reasoning and don't really take into account moral behavior. And this is something that I addressed in my moral reasoning video. Just because one can morally reason does not necessarily translate to that person acting morally in their behavior. So Bandura is maintaining that cognitive theories of morality fail to explain the gap between moral thought and moral action. So he's trying to dive into why this gap exists. And he says that we are currently witnessing a pervasive moral paradox in which people from all walks of life commit detrimental acts that violate their moral standards, but still retain positive self-regard. For me, that sounds exactly like today's society and people who are racist, where they still have very positive self-views. They think that they're great people and that they're ethically sound, but if you see the things that they're saying and the things that they're doing, they're clearly not. So Bandura is interested in asking, how? How is that a thing? How is this possible? So he highlights 8 mechanisms that people use to do that, to act terribly but still feel good about themselves. And we're not going to go into all 8. The one main thing that I wanted to talk about is tying back into phrasing and diction and how you wrap a topic around in words that suit your agenda. Individuals sanctify harmful means by investing them with worthy purposes, and justifications can take righteous, religious, social, economic, and civic forms. Harmful behavior can also be rendered benign or even altruistic through advantageous comparison, and this is what we see today. It's the most common. Clever contrasts portray the harm individuals commit as minor compared to the harm it prevents or that others commit. It's worth it, or I'm better than my neighbor. And then there are different forms of advantageous comparison. The utilitarian form, the harmful activity is construed as acceptable because it benefits the common good. Euphemistic language in its sanitizing forms cloaks harmful behavior in beneficent language and removes humanity from it. In convoluted forms, it conceals harmful behavior in unfathomable jargon, making it difficult to know what is being done. The first one, to recap, utilitarian, is that everything that we're doing, even though it's bad, is okay, it's justified because the end result is for the common good. The second one is euphemistic language, and the way he says that it's in its sanitizing forms, I think is particularly salient. And that's kind of what I was saying when we speak about people resisting arrest. We try so hard to downplay that and to take that out of the equation, again, for good reason, but it's something to be aware of how it could be the other way as well. When people are defending cops and police, they often try to first paint them in a good light and their actions in a good light. They were just reacting. They were just trying to survive. They were scared for their lives, that type of thing. Convoluted forms is when people come at you with stats and facts and try to make themselves present themselves as very smart and intelligent and well-researched. They're concealing very harmful behavior in jargon, in fancy words and stats and figures, and that is how they feel good. And I think, I don't know if this would be convoluted or euphemistic or utilitarian, but it's kind of how people also approach COVID-19, saying that, less than 1 people die, it's fine. But the thing is, you're quantifying deaths of actual real people. But anyways, there's a lot in this article, and I really encourage you to read it if you can get your hands on it. I will try to dive into this as soon as possible, but I'm so tired. I just don't really have a good grasp of it yet. I don't want to spread misinformation or to get many things incorrect. Even what I just read right now, I think he does a much better job explaining it. Anything I add to it, I think will just make it more obscure. But yeah, just something to be mindful of. Do you have a good self-image of yourself even while doing or partaking in negative or detrimental or harmful activities and thoughts? Something worth thinking. Wow, I'm so tired. Something worth thinking about. But anyways, just some thoughts that I wanted to share and get off my chest tonight. My heart breaks. It's very disheartening to see how many people are so focused on semantics and arguing these meaningless little things and criticizing people standing up for their beliefs and trying to prop them. It's almost as if people are trying to prop themselves up and make themselves feel smarter by putting people down and criticizing small things. When the larger picture at hand, there clearly is an issue. I don't think this is... If it's a case of mob mentality, then it's mind-blowing, and I'm sure people will study it in the centuries to come. But I really don't think that's the case. It's not a big social phenomenon that has risen out of 2020's social justice warrior landscape. I think it is a very deep-rooted problem that has just come to surface this year because people have had enough. And quite frankly, yeah, I've had enough. I think trying to maintain a neutral stance is becoming more and more difficult. I must be honest. When I say that, when I read those comments, I was just judging right away and did not think of wanting to engage in conversation at all. But anyways, that's everything. Have a wonderful night. I hope that gives you something to think about and that you are healthy, well, and being actively anti-racist. Good night.